I've been trucking for multiple decades at this point in my life, and there's occasionally odd or quirky things that you see on the drive. What I witnessed a couple weeks ago was definitely one of the oddest and one of the creepiest things I have seen while driving my truck. I was driving through the middle of the night somewhere in Nevada. Honestly, I don't really remember where, but I was surrounded by emptiness in the middle of the desert. Driving on highways in the middle of the night, especially not near any major cities, was normally very boring, and there weren't many cars on the road either. That night, I was cruising along listening to a podcast to help me stay awake. I was driving along and happened to catch up to a group of cars right in front of me. I noticed that the cars were all the same type of car. Nice black SUVs driving single file down the road, one after the other. Even more interestingly, the three cars' license plates were the Nevada state license plate, but each car only had one number on their license plates. The number on the license plates were 1, 2, and 3 in that order, with the car having the number 1 plates first in line, and the car with the plate that read number 3 at the end of the line. I followed these cars on the highway for many miles, intrigued the whole time about what these cars were doing. The only rational thought I could manufacture was that these cars were transporting people that were part of a bachelor or bachelorette party. Suddenly, the grouping of cars slowed down just a little bit, and then turned off the highway onto a dirt road that I had no idea was there. There was no street sign, mile marker, or anything else indicating that a road was going to be there. All three cars turned onto this dirt road, and quickly turned off their lights as soon as they were on the dirt road. I looked out into the desert towards where the cars had turned, but I could see nothing out there, not even the three cars as they blended into the darkness of the night. I didn't dare stop or check out the road they had turned onto. I just kept driving. The stretch of highway I was driving on was dead straight, and I kept checking behind me in my mirrors, looking for headlights to reappear onto the highway behind. However, mile after mile after mile, I saw no sign of a car getting back onto the highway. The grouping of black SUVs and the way they disappeared onto a road that wasn't even marked was eerie to me. They had to have been down that road often if they knew where to turn in the dead of night without hardly slowing down, and who knows what business they were up to down that dirt road. A long time ago, I worked for a small trucking company based out of the northeastern part of the United States. There would be many overnight driving stints on lonely backwood highways in the middle of nowhere. I was driving on one of these single-lane highways in Pennsylvania earlier one morning at around 3 a.m. My high-beam headlights worked really well, and I could see a far distance in front of me. This saved me many times, as I had plenty of time to see and avoid hitting deer and whatever other animals might be crossing the road. My high-beam headlights came in handy once again on this night, as at the edge of them I saw a figure in the road. I slowed down, thinking it was an animal, and giving it time to move and run off of the highway. However, I quickly saw that it wasn't an animal. There was a person sitting in the middle of the road with a sweatshirt hoodie pulled over their head. They were staring straight down at the ground and not moving, even as I blasted my horn multiple times. I rolled up and came to a stop about 90 feet away from them, waiting for them to move and deciding what to do. I debated getting out of my truck and seeing if they were okay. Common sense stopped me as I realized that whatever the reason they were there in the middle of the highway probably wouldn't end well for me. The person in the road still hadn't moved, and it was very possible that it could have been a dummy. I started rolling forward again, going into the oncoming lane to go around the person or dummy. I was only going about 10 miles per hour at this point, just to make sure that if it was a real person, I didn't hit them at all. Suddenly, I heard a thud on my driver's side door, and I looked over to see a person in all black had jumped out on the side of my truck and tried to open my door handle. I always drove with my doors locked, I suppose exactly for situations like this. I sped up as quickly as my truck would allow, and the person who had been clinging to the side of my truck jumped off within a few seconds. I got out of there as quickly as I could, and didn't stop again for the rest of the night. I had heard stories of truck jackings happening to other truckers, but never thought that it would happen to me. I'm glad that I trusted my instincts and stayed in my truck the whole time, because who knows how the night would have gone if I had gotten out of my truck. This happened to me a couple of years ago, in my first couple weeks as a truck driver. I'm a female truck driver, which in the trucking industry is a little rare, so I've had to deal with some minor harassment from fellow coworkers. This one particular instance, though, sticks with me the most because of how new I was in the trucking business. I was doing a multiple-day overnight haul through the Midwest of the US in late fall. I was driving on a boring highway when around 1 a.m. a fellow trucker merged onto the highway a bit in front of me. The other truck was still working up its speed after the merge, so I switched into the left lane of the two-lane highway to pass the other truck. As I passed, I gave my courtesy wave as I do to any other trucker that I see on the road. The man driving the other truck made eye contact with me as I passed. I was expecting a friendly smile or wave back, but he just watched as I passed, his face staying emotionless. All truckers have a channel that they can communicate with other truckers on, and only a minute after I had passed the other truck, I heard a man's voice on the channel. The voice stated that he was the driver of the truck that was now behind me. He advised me to pull over, saying that one of my tires was flat. I had been driving for a while since my last stop, but as far as I could tell, I didn't notice that I had a flat tire. If I did have a flat tire, it didn't seem to be affecting my journey much. Regardless, I spoke back over the trucker channel, thanking the man for letting me know and saying I would check it out at the next truck stop. He radioed back to me, urging me to pull over now, that if I kept driving, I might cause serious damage to the truck and potentially myself. I thought about pulling over to check my tires, but since I was a new driver, I decided not to. If I had blown a tire, I wanted to change it at a truck stop with a multitude of light to make sure that I would change it correctly. I radioed back politely that I had set my mind on checking and changing my tire at the next truck stop. The next truck stop was still 30 or so miles away, and the whole time the other trucker kept talking on the radio every couple minutes. The man kept urging me that I had to pull over, and that he could even help me change the tire if I needed it. I continued driving, and eventually turned off my radio as I was getting sick of hearing his voice basically begging me to pull over. I finally approached the large truck stop and took the exit, and the other truck behind me kept going down the highway. When I got out at the stop to check my tires, I did a thorough inspection, only to reveal that none of my tires were flat, or even remotely close to being flat. I was struck with a sense of chilling coldness as I pictured the man's voice on the radio begging me to pull over to fix a phantom flat tire. I'm glad that even in my inexperience as a truck driver at the time, I did not pull over. I tried to find out who was driving that truck by asking the company for help, and also extensively searching for it online, but nothing ever came up. It scares me that the man is still out there driving trucks, potentially trying to lure other female truck drivers out of their trucks. One of my most traumatic experiences as a truck driver happened one foggy night a decade ago. It was late at night and I found myself driving my truck through thick, swirling fog. I'd been on the road for hours and was tired but close to the destination, so I kept pushing through. The fog had rolled in unexpectedly, swallowing the entire road. My headlights didn't do much, barely illuminating the road. I had the radio on pretty loud, hoping that the sounds of music and voices would help keep me awake. It also started raining early in the night, and the drumming of the rain on the windshield was basically drowning out the radio anyway. I strained to see beyond the mist, squinting, trying to see through the dense fog. The road signs would pop up out of nowhere, appearing suddenly and disappearing just as fast. I gripped the wheel tight, just focusing on trying to stay in my lane and not run off the road. The white lines blended into the mist, making it difficult to judge where the edges of the road were. The fog seemed to get worse. It got so bad that I thought about pulling over right there on the side of the highway. My visibility was so bad that I could only see a few feet ahead of me, so I switched on my hazards, hoping to signal to other vehicles who might be out here in the fog. Suddenly, I saw a shape up ahead. It was another truck, and its lights were barely visible. It was nice to know that I wasn't the only one out here battling the fog. I flashed my headlights partly as a friendly acknowledgement to the other driver, and partly to make sure that he saw me through the fog. As we approached each other, I realized something was wrong. The truck didn't slow down and kept coming straight at me, not veering right or left. I started to panic as I realized the truck was not going to slow down. I slammed on my brakes and the tires screeched. The other truck was close now. I could see the driver. It was just a silhouette behind the windshield. My heart was pounding and I swerved to the right and narrowly missed a collision. The other truck kept going and disappeared into the fog behind me. I sat there in my truck with my hands shaking on the wheel. I tried to calm down from the near head-on collision and comprehend what just happened. Was it a mistake? Did the other driver really never see me, or was it something sinister? It was like he was trying to run into me almost. I checked my mirrors and then cautiously pulled back onto the road. I kept my speed low through the rest of the fog. My nerves were on edge and I was constantly looking around for other vehicles. It seemed to take forever as I continued through the fog, but finally things started to clear up. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept thinking about what had happened. In the morning, I checked my truck carefully, looking for any signs of damage. There was nothing, no evidence, but I'll never forget what happened that night. One time, while driving my truck on a cross-country trip, I experienced a scary situation. I was driving through the Appalachian mountain range one evening. I had recently made a stop and got some sleep, so I was all fueled to drive through the night with all the snacks and energy drinks that I needed to keep me awake. It was nearing sunset as I drove along a nice and quiet highway. It was actually a quite scenic drive, and everything looked pretty in the sunset. I was coming up upon a person who was walking on the side of the highway. They were trying to catch a ride and hitchhike to wherever they wanted to go. I enjoyed picking hitchhikers because it made the drive much easier with someone to talk to, and everyone I had picked up previously while trucking had been nice. I slowed down and pulled onto the shoulder of the highway in front of the hitchhiker and waited for them to come up to the side of my truck. A woman appeared by my driver's side window. She had a backpack on and looked tired and dirty, as if she had been camping for a couple nights. I asked her where she needed to go, and she just stated quietly that the next town would be great. I told her yes, and the next town wasn't too much farther. I thought I could get her there before it was completely dark. She then hopped in the passenger seat, and we were off. I tried to make some simple conversation during the drive, asking what she was doing out in the Appalachians and where she was coming from. She didn't give me much at all, saying very simple one-word answers, and was monotone the entire ride. All she told me was that she had been camping and was heading back home, which apparently was the town we were headed for. We arrived at the small little town in the waning hours of dusk. The woman spoke more than one word for the first time the whole trip. She mentioned that she lived outside of a town, but right off the highway, so it worked better for her if I drove a little farther past the town and dropped her off on the side of the highway right by her house. It was a simple enough request, so I said sure, and we continued down the highway. After a while, the woman had me pull over onto the shoulder of the highway. From where I was stopped, I could see a narrow dirt road heading back to a dingy-looking cabin. As the woman gathered her backpack, I kept peering down the dirt road because of how odd it was to me that she lived in this tiny, kind of run-down cabin. As I was looking at the cabin, I saw 3 men dart across my vision from inside the cabin to behind a woodpile. It happened in the blink of a second, but I for sure saw the 3 men. Just then, the woman asked me if I wanted to come inside and take a break from driving and get something to eat. I asked the woman if she lived alone in the cabin, and she responded that she did. This heightened my suspicion even farther. I probably would have declined the offer anyway, but seeing the men who left the house and hid behind the woodpile made me suspect that the woman was lying to me. I didn't want to take the risk, so I thanked her but declined and said that I had to be on my way. Maybe I was just imagining something worse than it was, but I get the chills when I think about what would have happened to me if I would have left my truck and gone down the dirt road.